Hello and welcome to Middlebury Edition. I'm Middlebury Representative Robin Scheu, your host for the program. Middlebury Edition was created primarily for the purpose of educating folks about local services and the Vermont legislature, and to provide an opportunity for legislators and local nonprofit organizations to talk about their work. Today's guest is Representative Diane Lanpher, who is one of two reps for the Addison 3 district, which includes Vergennes, Addison, Ferrisburgh, Panton, and Waltham. This is Diane's 7th term in the House. She began her legislative career on the House Transportation Committee, where she served for 6 years, and then she moved to House Appropriations. Beginning this past January, Diane moved back to House Transportation, this time as the chair of the committee. This committee is going to play a critical role as it relates to the federal infrastructure bill that President Biden just signed. And that's in addition to the normal full load of transportation issues. So we have much to talk about today. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
It's great to have you on the show. It's fun. It'll be fun to hear about it, what's happening. So let's first talk about your committee. It's House Transportation. You've had a lot of experience there. What is the committee responsible for considering? What are the types of things we talk about in transportation?
The typical year, which sometimes are not always typical recently, are they? A typical year is, as you know, the House begins a budget process. You know, we get the suggestion from the governor, and the House Transportation Committee gets what we call the T-bill, the transportation bill, somewhere right around mid-January or so, right? And that includes the budget and the programs and the projects that the administration are suggesting will happen in that next fiscal year, but also what is called a STIP, which is the State Transportation Program, which by federal law we have to have a 1-year look back, and it's a 6-year program. So we look out as far as like 4 years. So you're looking at things that are projects that are in different phases over time.
So when we talk about transportation, are we talking about cars and trucks? And public transportation. I mean, when I think transportation, that's, but we're talking about more than just that.
Yes, we're talking what would be your typical roads, bridges, culverts, public transit, airports, rail, all that kind of infrastructure, and
bicycles now too, right?
Well, bicycles have
That's
always
been new.
been a part.
I
don't think they've always been a part of transportation, including maybe horseback riding on our streets. When we did Complete Streets many years ago.
Right.
What did we consider when you think about the user, a vulnerable user on a highway, and who are they? And we're always learning something new and expanding. Now we're actually looking at not just what you would consider all of those hard surface items, but also looking at things like questioning how are we approaching projects in an equitable way? Are we putting vulnerable people at a disadvantage with particular transportation? Are we including them in the process? Are all voices being heard? Are subject matter being considered that's outside of what was normally the thinking? And so there's an evolving occurring even over in the last decade of my decade plus now being in the House, where the thought of transportation used to be and where it is today. And I think will be changing again with a study of looking at asking our RPCs, the regional planning commissions across the state, which is about one in every county, to partner up with the agency to examine how are we approaching the question of equitable transportation. Are we considering all users?
So when you say that, I think first of sort of urban versus rural. It's easy in Chittenden County maybe to have buses that go, but even here in Addison County, buses don't go everywhere. In other more rural parts of the state, it's even harder to offer those kinds of services.
Yes. Do we have the mobility? Are we offering mobility equitably? Is projects that we have on the books disproportionately impacting maybe a particular group of people, like when you put in a new road or something? I know that in the past, depending on where you would have to go through in a right-of-way process, we need to look at those things in a different way. And I'll be looking forward to, and our committee will be looking forward to, getting the results back of that sort of statewide examination of just how we might be able to do that better. And that will take a different way of looking at things. So that's happening at the same time that we look at the budgets, we look at the projects, we look at in a more overseeing view of like, how are we doing percentage-wise against our, I'll give you an example. When I first started, 20% of the bridges in the state of Vermont were either structurally or functionally deficient, which is like 1 in 20. That was, not an enviable position for anybody, and Vermonters didn't want that. So looking at how do we use the projects to get through to a better percentage. So we take a great deal of notice, like where are we in making progress in reducing that number,
and making them more safe.
6%.
Really?
Now. Yes.
Oh, that's great.
So over that time, although I wouldn't say 6% is like is a much better place to be than where we were.
Yeah.
It's maybe still not. We're now going to have to recalculate the standard that we want to achieve to.
Right.
Because that goal has been achieved.
Right. Right.
And,
and I think
Irene
that's
helped.
better. Yeah. Yes. I mean, we have had things that have come our way, and so one of the things that's coming our way is this infrastructure bill, this federal infrastructure bill that President Biden just signed into law, and I think Vermont's in for getting a bunch of money, aren't we? Can you tell us about that?
So far, yes, I would say. Representative Scheu, we have always been a part of a process that has been always dealing with trying to stretch back. We've had holes to constantly fill every year. So this is a very new position to be in a place where we have some room now, which is wonderful. So yes, the answer is yes, we are on target, and it was signed yesterday. I'm still waiting for some sort of shoe to fall that some part of it's not going to be true.
Right.
That I'll wake up tomorrow and something
But what
won't
we
be
know
there.
what we know
so far, without going into too much detail, is typically in the formula funds, which is like the federal highway piece, the formula part that Vermont has. And the federal bill is usually a 5-year bill. Okay. In the last, which is called the FAST Act, Vermont would receive over that 5 years $1.06 billion
over a 5-year period.
Over a 5-year period. So this new bill has us at 1.53. It's like a 50% increase in the availability of funds. They're not going to hand it to us. And I think this is where some people think, oh, you've got this. It's not in the bank.
Yeah.
It still resides at the federal level in the formula funds. You have to draw them down. And you have to draw them down with projects that, in most cases, require a state match. That state match comes if it's like 89, 91, federal highway is at a 90-10. 90% federal, 10% state. But most projects that you see are 80-20. Some might even be 70-30. But you can pretty much on average say that for every dollar the Fed has in the formula fund, the state of Vermont is going to need to match that with 20. So in lies a little bit of a sticky wicket on the match. So we're going to need to not just be excited about what's available, to be able to draw down over that time period. You can spread it out over the time. It's not like you have to take it equal amounts each year.
Okay, so if you have $1.5 billion, you could do 400,000 one year and 100,000 another year, or whatever worked.
Yeah, so there's some flexibility within that. It's not some sort of hard fast. And that's in that one particular program. So that's the formula funds that funds many and most of the projects.
Is that, for example, we just finished our railroad bridge project in Middlebury,
Yes.
and I think that was a 90-10 or a 95-5. I think we got actually
there's
something.
Many different approaches
Okay.
to that, but there was some of it 90-10, depending on the project. Some would be 90 or 80-20.
Yeah.
But that project is complete. And I
Yes.
think it was actually a question that I had received in testimony saying, oh, looking at over time how last year's to this last budget had dipped in the bridges, and it's because it's project driven.
Yeah.
So it's not like 100 million every year. So some year
Right.
it might be 110, and another year it might be 90, depending on the projects that are out there.
Yeah.
So there are formula funds. There are direct pieces like the public transit. Okay, so those are not to be mixed in with other programs. So like our public transit has gotten a nice bump, what I can see from the federal support.
Okay.
And in other ways, there are also dollars that come through the state that goes out through our hands or through VTrans. But there are also things like the Chittenden MPO or their
What's an
Regional
MPO?
Planning Commission,
Okay.
their municipal plan.
Okay.
They can apply for and receive funds directly. So
From the federal government?
From the federal government.
Okay.
So some people say like, oh, why are you doing X when a community or a regional planning could actually have received those funds directly or in a different way.
Right.
So
So
I-
you won't be overseeing the whole, I mean, I think I read somewhere that there's like, we're getting about $2.2 billion in federal funds under this new infrastructure bill, but some of it's going to broadband.
Yes.
Some of it's going to fix bridges and, other public transportation. Some
And
of it's going,
resiliency.
resiliency.
It's going to be very key.
Yeah, and
I'm
so
looking-
that may or may not be your committee, or maybe multiple
Some-
committees, and then electric vehicle chargers, which will be your committee, yes?
Yes. So I'll get excited about this. All right. So you will see that in this infrastructure bill, there is a very specific number for electric charging stations, which is one of the things that people have really needed. We need
Yeah.
to electrify our transportation system, but not just with the vehicles, but with the additional support around the infrastructure to relieve the range anxiety and all of those.
Yeah.
So just to give you an example, in this past year, we would be looking at what we had for funding for level 3 charging stations was what people are clamoring for.
And that's the
one,
faster
20
level, okay,
The
yeah,
20,
yeah.
it takes about 20 minutes or half an
Oh,
hour.
nice.
Right, versus
Okay.
the level 2, which is many hours, which there's a
Yeah.
lot of level 2 charging stations
Yeah.
out there. But level 3 is the next place to go. We had dollars enough to do 17 across the state.
Wow.
This money is going to allow us 300.
Oh my
Just
goodness.
to give you an idea
Wow.
of the dramatic input. It'll give me goosebumps thinking about it, what we're going to be able to do. We're
Yeah.
not, all of this great things also come, again, where's the match money? Whose
Yeah.
committee? Where are we going to do? And in what year? Workforce issues are just as real
Yeah.
for state government and contractors.
Yeah.
So as we have this nice opportunity,
Yes.
we're going to have to be very vigilant around making sure that we can build at the rate of trust, build at the rate of construction, and not.
And having enough workers and trained
Mm-hmm.
people to do the work, that's a challenge that every business is facing right now. And obviously, the state of Vermont is not
also there.
is part of that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and like contracting, and so just when
Wow.
we have this, but the good thing is that we have it for many years.
Yes,
So
that's good. And are there incentives that come along with electric vehicles, or are those is that state money that we've done?
We put the state dollars into that, and right
Okay.
now we were very thrilled when we could do $500,000 or $1
Mm-hmm.
million, and last year we did 2.7. So I'm anticipating with this, it would be an opportunity to see if we're able to advance that even
Yeah.
further, because we have right now about 4,000 electric vehicles on the road
Mm-hmm.
of 539,000. So if you think about it in
Wow.
comparison,
0.00.
right, and so which if you don't, brings us to the point where there's not only the need for where the match money comes in, but also looking at how do we transform the way transportation funding is gathered in this state.
Yeah.
because there's a lot of people often think, why are they're not paying their fair share, which I'm not so sure anybody actually pays their fair share, but there's a point with that. At some point, we're incentivizing a particular electrification, and we don't want to disincentivize that. But at some point, it's going to be the majority. And I believe it's going to be sooner than we think.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you look at GM making the announcement that they will not be building what they call ICE, internal combustion engines, after 2035.
Right.
They're going to be phasing out. So we're going to have to change from the gas tax way that we collect, although the purchase and use is doing fairly well.
But the gas tax is how we do a lot of funding of our roads and bridges and things that people drive on all the time. And if people aren't buying gas, and I know we've been having this problem for years as cars have gotten more efficient, and they're getting 50 miles a gallon instead of 20, people aren't spending
even
as much.
12 in some
right,
cases.
Right,
Yes.
So we've already had this ongoing problem of the decline in the gas tax, which makes it hard. So your committee would be taking up things like, how do we think about this differently if people are going to electric vehicles, which we want them to do?
Right, and so how do we fundamentally not just switch or to include this new mode, electric, but also to make sure that that we've captured what we need to for the future, short term and long term.
Right.
So I would like to see our committee, because we'll have a lot to say about climate. The transportation world is kind of like the ag was to the lake.
Yes.
As phosphorus, transportation is to the emissions. And we're going to seriously look at what comes out of the Climate Council on December 1. And we need to look at how are we going to disincentivize fossil fuels, how are we going to incentivize the electrification. And I would like to, I don't know if we'll get there, but I think Vermonters, the education around why this is important and making sure that everybody feels that they can do their part as we change. And then in the fourth is looking at short-term and long-term funding. Not that we're going to fix that in a year, but I think we have an opportunity to look at it.
You have to start
roll
looking
it out.
at it.
It's going to take a decade of change.
Yeah, sure. So let's talk a little bit about projects, but before we get into how projects get in the budget, I want to talk about one that's near and dear to people's hearts locally, and I know for you and for Jen's as well, and that's the train.
Yes.
So what's happening? I mean, we've been watching our train station come to life and be created,
it's beautiful.
And I'm so excited. And what does that mean? And when are people going to be able to get on the train?
Well, every time I give a date myself, it keeps shifting. The Addison Independent at one time said, "Please just call me when it arrives," because it was always going to be before the snow flies. It's sort of an inside joke with us, but for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of things that need to fall right in a line before we bring Amtrak in. And I think it's going to be very important that we have all of those components ready to receive the startup of the train, and not allow us to get 95% of the way there and trying to figure out how we could make shifting, because I want it to be as successful as possible and not have an issue. So there are things that need to happen. So I was hoping by early January, then it was town meeting maybe. It's going to be spring. I would probably say by 4th of July right now would be safe.
So
this summer.
Midsummer.
4th of July, looking for an opportunity. There's projects in Burlington right now. I think our side right here between Middlebury and Virgins, I think we're ready. There's some switches and some things that need to go in the summer, but the big piece now is having the railroad yard ready.
Oh, yes. Up in Burlington. Is
in
that where the
Burlington.
train's going to end?
It's going to overnight, yes.
Okay, and so if we were to hop on a train in Middlebury, when it comes, we could go to Burlington.
Well, it'd be awfully late at night right now.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, so
because
maybe
it's going
not.
to come up. Remember, it comes into Rutland
So where
at
is
9:30
it? Where does it start?
It starts in New York City.
Okay.
And we have one of the best times out of New York. It's like 3:30
in the afternoon.
Yes. So it's like after. So weekenders coming up to Killington.
Yeah.
It's a an advantageous time.
Yeah.
Comes into Rutland at about 9.
So it goes through
9:30.
Albany.
Yes.
And do you have to change trains?
No.
Oh,
Then
great.
it comes up from Albany, goes into
Rutland.
Rutland. So right now it stops, the Ethan Allen stops in Rutland.
Right, okay.
That's the train that we want to bring further up to Burlington.
Okay.
So it arrives at 9:30 in Rutland. We're not going to mess with that. It would be next stop Middlebury, a hard stop, a whistle stop in Vergennes, and then Burlington, the hard stop. So it would be late in the evening, 10 o'clock,
Okay.
11 o'clock, when it gets there. But on the plus side is when it leaves Burlington
Yeah.
in the morning, you'll be able to catch the train, whistle stop out of Vergennes, meaning I don't want to slow the train down if there's no one that wants to get on or off.
So you have to stand there and kind of wave and
Well,
it'll
they'll
come.
electronically know
Okay,
if there's somebody
okay.
that needs to get off
Good.
or on. So it'll keep the time frame better.
So what time would it leave Burlington in the morning?
In the morning, early. So you would be able to take out of Burlington. I don't know exactly what time.
Yeah.
Don't hold me to that one, because that all has to do with schedules and connections and freight
Yeah.
and a lot of variables. But it would be coming out of Burlington in the morning. So if you wanted to get to New York City, you could leave out of Burlington, out of Vergennes, out of Middlebury in the morning and
Yeah.
be in New York by 2:30.
Really? By 2:30 in the afternoon?
Yes. So that's the better
great.
part. And then
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just going to be so exciting to have that.
it is.
So it really won't be used for commuting between cities in Vermont, but it will be for that longer.
Yeah, managing that expectation, because I have constituents too that are like, oh, I can't wait to be able to go shopping in Burlington.
Yeah.
That is true, not this particular, but I am not giving up on the possibility of commuter rail in the sometime future, which would
Great.
be also something I would like to
Good.
consider, because there are electric options out there that I'd love to talk about at some time.
Okay. Well, we could keep talking a lot. We have
can.
we have about 5 minutes, so I want to be sure we cover everything that we would like to. So, what do you see as sort of broadly issues that are important for next session? What do you see coming up for? It doesn't have to just be in your committee.
Beyond transportation,
Yeah.
I think we're as a House and the Senate, we're going to be wrestling with where do we need to plan out the pension issue is going to be, because pensions, as you well know, and we cannot use any of those nice ARPA funds or any of the
Right.
COVID dollars or any of this $2 billion cannot be used for that, and
Right.
so we have a significant issue with
Yeah.
that. And that's going to be really, really tough as people have worked over the summer.
Yes,
So
they're still working.
pensions, redistricting is going to be an interesting piece
Yeah.
because of the shortened time frame
Yes.
on that. The Climate Council recommendations and where Vermont wants to put itself on a long-term track
Right.
is going to be a big
Yeah.
conversation.
We have 2 constitutional amendments that we need to vote on in the House, right? They were
I'm
voted
hoping
on
we
in the
do that
Senate.
very early.
I think
the House
so.
votes on it and it goes directly out to the voters.
Right,
for-
so assuming we pass, which it looks like we will, both the constitutional amendments, Proposition 2 and Proposition 5, that would go to the voters next November
yes,
for a referendum. It's the only time, just sort of educating folks here, it's the only time in Vermont law that you can have a referendum, that the voters vote on something. Other states you can petition and get something on the ballot statewide, and you
Yeah.
can't here except for constitutional amendments. So that'll be a big
that'll
thing.
be a big step for
Yeah.
Vermont, but I think for the House, as you know, the House and the Senate have been putting in it on this is like the 4th year of that.
Right,
of
the
that
second
process.
biennium, so we should be
We're just
done.
just about there.
Yeah. And what about your committee? I mean, we've talked a lot about what's going on in your committee, but
So
you're going to be a
as you
busy
men-
woman.
As you mentioned at the beginning, not just the committee, but as a chair.
Yeah,
Last year we did it all on Zoom.
yeah.
My committee hasn't actually met in person. We're going to meet
Right.
the first time December 14th here to hear the budget adjustment process.
Oh, I'll be in there with you because House
Yes.
Appropriations is meeting that
So
week.
we're gonna meet in the morning to hear about a more condensed, but yet hopefully the update on the infrastructure
Yeah.
bill, also from the Climate Council, because that'll be out, and then in the
That's right.
afternoon we're looking forward to joining House Appropriations, which is why we scheduled it for timing
Okay,
so that we
yes.
can hear the fiscal pieces of
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have your regular work and all the projects that you work on every year with the Agency of Transportation, and you have this influx of federal funds, much of which needs to be matched by state dollars some way. So, and yeah,
I don't think
lots
there'll
of
be a moment there will,
I don't
and
think
we
so.
think 18 weeks, but we're there, January to May, but we forget there's crossover. The Senate has to have a piece at it, so we have
Right.
it just half that time, and we have to have it
Right,
over.
pass it over to the other body. So
Yeah.
I think there'll be a lot going on.
And
Great.
we're working now, so
Yeah.
we've been meeting and talking with the agency now. I have a standing weekly meeting
Yeah.
with the agency so that we can. That's because we're in the middle of a biennium. It's not
Right,
an election,
right.
so that we're all still reps. We're all
Yeah.
still, so we can get a better
Right.
jump on
and
January.
be ready for January. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. So we need to wrap up.
Okay.
Anything else you want people to know? I think we're going to put up your ledge email so people
Okay,
can
yeah.
contact you that way if they have questions about transportation or anything else. And I think that's it. So thanks so much for being on the show. It's been great having you, Diane.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Good. That's it for now. My guest today has been Representative Diane Lanpher. Thanks to MCTV for producing this show. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you next time.